I'm Rachel Morgan, 32 years old, a civil architect living in Portland, Oregon. That evening, during what should have been a routine Friday dinner at my parents' house, everything collapsed. My parents, my brother Tyler, and his girlfriend sat around the table. The salmon sat untouched. When my mother leaned forward, her voice icy cold. "You can move to the basement or find your own place." Her eyes pierced through me. Tyler immediately jumped in, his tone dripping with satisfaction. "Honestly, the sooner you're out, the better for everyone." The wine glass nearly slipped from my hand, clinking against the plate. I had been covering the majority of this household's expenses: utility bills, home repairs, even the brand new dishwasher. Yet now I was being treated like a burden, disposable. Tyler's girlfriend Amber smirked, her eyes gleaming like she'd just closed a major deal. I tried to speak up, my voice shaking, listing every cent I had invested into this house. But my mother simply raised her hand dismissively. "It's already decided." My father stayed silent, staring at his food, refusing to meet my gaze. Fury surged through me. I stood up, grabbed my purse and keys, and said, "Fine, I'm done here." That same night, I packed everything that belonged to me, my mounted TV, the sectional sofa, even the espresso machine, and walked away from the place I had once called home. 10 days later, my phone buzzed. It was my father calling, his voice strained. When I answered, I could hear Tyler yelling frantically in the background, his words cracking with panic. "She's lying. Dad, tell me she's lying." The chaos poured through the speaker just as I had begun rebuilding my life. And what happened next would turn their world completely upside down. Before we dive deeper into my story, tell me, what time is it where you're watching this, and which city are you from? I'd love to know just how far my story has traveled and who it has reached. Years ago, I moved back into my parents' house in Portland to help keep things afloat. After my grandfather passed away, the bills piled up: mortgage, utilities, even the cracked foundation Dad kept postponing. I'm a civil architect, and I took it upon myself to cover most of those costs. My paycheck went toward new insulation, a heating system upgrade, and keeping the electricity on. I worked 65-hour weeks, juggling construction site visits and late-night design proposals, but it never felt like enough. Dad would nod when I showed him the invoices, but his attention was always elsewhere, on my brother, Tyler. Tyler had a talent for failing spectacularly. He'd cycled through one venture after another: craft beer startup, NFT trading, even some questionable drop shipping business that collapsed within months. Each time he'd come back to Dad with a fresh pitch, and Dad would lap it up, praising his entrepreneurial spirit. Meanwhile, my contributions barely registered. Once I overheard Mom whisper to Dad, "She's just here temporarily, Robert. Tyler's the one with real ambition." It stung, like I was some temporary tenant paying rent instead of their daughter keeping the house standing. Then Tyler met Amber. He brought her to Sunday brunch one morning, all smiles, introducing her as a luxury real estate agent with a dazzling smile and designer heels. Dad and Mom couldn't stop raving about her: how polished she was, how she had everything figured out. I watched her arrive in a sleek white Tesla, wearing a watch that screamed six figures. It didn't add up. Luxury real estate in Portland was competitive, sure, but not that lucrative for someone barely 28. She'd laugh too enthusiastically at Dad's jokes, flipping her hair while Tyler beamed like he'd won the lottery. I tried asking her about her work, clients, properties, the usual, but she'd deflect, pivoting to some vague deal she was supposedly closing. I started noticing other things. She'd show up with shopping bags from Nordstrom and Saks, stores I couldn't afford even with overtime. Once she flaunted a new Chanel bag, claiming it was a business investment. Tyler didn't question it. He just bragged about her hustle. Dad would pat him on the back saying, "You found yourself a winner, son." I'd bite my tongue, but the numbers weren't adding up. My salary was stretched thin covering the house, yet she was flashing cash like it grew on trees. I mentioned it to Mom once, asking if anyone else found her lifestyle suspicious. Mom just shrugged, saying, "She's ambitious, Rachel. Don't be so cynical." It wasn't just the money. She had this way of controlling conversations like she was always pitching something. She'd talk about property flips, dropping terms like capital gains and leverage that made Dad's eyes light up. Tyler hung on her every word, nodding like an eager puppy. I'd try to contribute, mentioning how I'd just paid off the property insurance, but Dad would cut me off saying, "Let's hear about Amber's next investment." It was like I was invisible unless a bill needed paying. Once I caught her glancing at me during dinner, a smirk flickering across her face, like she knew she had them all wrapped around her finger. The worst part was how they treated me outside those moments. Tyler would borrow my car without asking, claiming he needed it for business meetings. Dad would tell me to contribute more around the house, even though I was already carrying most of it financially. Mom stayed quiet, busying herself with her book club or gardening, avoiding eye contact. I started keeping a detailed record of every dollar I spent on that house, over $300,000 across the years. I wasn't just helping, I was sustaining them. But to them, I was the safety net, the reliable one who'd always be there, while Tyler and Amber were the golden couple. I'd lie awake at night staring at the ceiling in my childhood bedroom, wondering why my efforts were invisible. I'd think about the career opportunities I'd declined to stay close, the weekends I spent fixing plumbing instead of living my life. Something about her, her glossy confidence, her two perfect answers, kept bothering me. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was playing a much bigger game, one that might cost us more than just my place at the table. That Friday evening, I walked into the dining room expecting a quiet meal. The table was set with Mom's vintage china, the smell of herb-roasted salmon filling the air. I settled into my usual chair, forcing a smile as Dad served the food. Mom fussed with the napkins, her hands jittery. Then the front door burst open. Electricity, repairs, the mortgage, I bought the dishwasher, the heating system, even the paint on these walls. And now you want me to sleep in the basement? I turned to Dad, expecting some acknowledgement, but he just sighed. "It's time for you to step aside," he said. "Tyler and Amber need the space more. They have plans." Plans? I wanted to scream. Tyler's plans never lasted longer than a season, and I was the one keeping this family above water. Tyler leaned forward, his grin widening. "You're not exactly crucial here, Rachel," he said mockingly. "You're just here." Amber stifled a laugh, covering her mouth with a manicured hand. I clenched my fists under the table, my nails digging into my palms. "Not crucial?" I shot back. "I've paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to keep this roof over your heads. I've turned down promotions to stay here, worked weekends fixing problems. What have you done, Tyler?" My voice cracked, but I didn't care. I was done being invisible. Dad slammed his hand on the table, making the glasses rattle. "Enough!" he barked. "This isn't about you, their family, and they're staying. End of discussion." Mom looked down, twisting her napkin, saying nothing. I stared at her, waiting for something. A word, a glance, anything. But she just sat there, silent as always. Amber leaned against Tyler, whispering something that made him chuckle. The room felt suffocating, like the walls were closing in. I pushed my chair back, the screech echoing in the silence. "I'm not doing this," I said, standing up. "If I'm not wanted, I'm gone." I stormed upstairs, my heart pounding. I grabbed a duffel bag and started packing. Clothes, laptop, essential documents. Then I went to the living room and unplugged the 65-inch TV I'd purchased last year. I started hauling the sectional sofa cushions I'd paid for toward the front door. Tyler followed, laughing. "You're seriously taking the couch?" he said. I ignored him, loading my belongings into my car. Dad stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "You're being dramatic," he said. I didn't respond. I loaded the last box, slammed the trunk, and drove off, the house shrinking in my rearview mirror. I wasn't just leaving a room, I was done carrying them all. A few days later, I settled into a modern studio apartment in downtown Portland, the sounds of the city outside my window a stark contrast to the suffocating silence of my parents' house. My colleague Jessica had found the listing, a cozy space with just enough room for my salvaged TV and sofa. She stopped by that first night, her infectious laugh filling the bare living room as she helped me unpack boxes. "You need to clear your head, Rachel," she said, handing me a flyer for a Pilates class at a nearby studio. "It's not just exercise, it's therapy." I wasn't convinced, but her enthusiasm was contagious. The next evening, I showed up to the class, fumbling through the moves, feeling lighter for the first time in weeks. Jessica's encouragement became an anchor as I rebuilt my life. Still, I couldn't shake the unease about Amber. Her extravagant lifestyle, those designer bags, that Tesla kept gnawing at me. I decided to investigate. I called Marcus, an old colleague in luxury real estate I'd met years ago at an industry conference. He answered on the second ring, his voice steady but curious. "Rachel, long time. What's going on?" I got straight to the point, asking if he knew anything about Amber Chen, Tyler's girlfriend. I described her job as a luxury real estate agent, her big talk about deals, and the money she seemed to have in abundance. Marcus went quiet for a moment. "Amber Chen?" he asked. "She's been on several people's radar. Word is her agency's under investigation for fraudulent dealings, inflating property appraisals, skimming client funds. Nothing's been proven yet, but she's definitely not clean." My heart sank. I thanked Marcus and hung up, my mind racing. If Amber was trouble, my family was in deeper than I thought. I dialed Dad's number, hoping he'd listen. "Dad, you need to hear this," I started, explaining what Marcus had told me about Amber's firm. His response was curt. "Stay out of their business, Rachel," he said. "They're doing just fine without you stirring up drama." I pressed harder, mentioning the investigation, but he cut me off. "Enough. Focus on your own life." The line went dead. I stared at my phone, frustration boiling over. Dad's blind trust in Tyler and Amber was infuriating, but I wasn't surprised. He'd always chosen Tyler's side no matter the cost. Mom was next. I called her, hoping for even a crack in her usual silence. "Mom, please just listen," I said, laying out the red flags about Amber. She sighed, her voice soft but firm. "Rachel, let it go. They're happy. Don't ruin it." I wanted to scream. How could they be so blind? But I knew arguing was pointless. Mom never challenged Dad or Tyler. I hung up, feeling more isolated than ever, but determined to find the truth. I started reaching out to old contacts. A former client from my architecture firm had worked in real estate law, so I sent her an email asking if she'd heard of Amber's agency. She replied quickly, confirming Marcus's story. The firm was tied to multiple complaints about fraudulent mortgages and forged documents. Another contact, a building inspector I'd collaborated with, mentioned overhearing rumors at a local title company about Amber pushing questionable deals. Each piece of information tightened the knot in my stomach. I wasn't just suspicious anymore, I was certain she was hiding something significant. I kept my findings to myself, building a mental case file of everything I'd learned. I checked public records online, finding several properties listed under Amber's name, all sold at suspiciously inflated prices to buyers who later filed disputes. It wasn't definitive proof, but it was enough to keep me digging. I texted Marcus again, asking him to alert me if he heard anything new. He promised to keep listening. Meanwhile, I threw myself into my new routine: work, Pilates, dinners with Jessica. The city felt like a fresh start, but the weight of my family's dismissal lingered. I couldn't help wondering how far Amber's schemes reached and whether Tyler was complicit or just another victim. 3 weeks later, I ran into Patricia, an old family friend, at a local coffee shop. She was sipping a latte at a corner table, her silver hair pulled back elegantly. "Rachel, it's been forever," she said, waving me over. We caught up briefly, but when I mentioned Tyler's girlfriend, Patricia's smile vanished. "Amber Chen?" she asked, her voice dropping. I knew her a few years back. She worked for a real estate firm in Seattle. Shady operation, always cutting corners. They got sued for forging client signatures and inflating property values to pocket the difference. Amber was deeply involved, though she managed to dodge the fallout. My pulse quickened. This wasn't just gossip. It was another piece of the puzzle I'd been assembling. I drove straight to my parents' house, my hands gripping the steering wheel. Tyler was in the driveway unloading groceries, looking smug as ever. I didn't waste time. "We need to talk," I said, pulling out my phone to show him the email from Marcus detailing Amber's agency's investigation. "She's not who you think, Tyler. Her firm's been scamming people for years. Fake appraisals, stolen funds. Patricia just told me she was part of a fraud scheme in Seattle." Tyler's face darkened. He snatched the phone, scanned the email, then shoved it back at me. "You're just jealous," he spat. "Amber's successful and you can't stand it. Stop making things up." I stared at him, stunned. "This isn't about me," I said. "This is about your girlfriend putting our family at risk." He laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Go play detective somewhere else, Rachel." Inside, Mom was in the kitchen preparing coffee. I tried again, hoping she'd hear me out. "Mom, Patricia knew Amber before," I said, keeping my voice steady. "She was involved with a company that defrauded people. You need to check what she's doing with the house." Mom's hand paused, but she didn't look up. "Rachel, don't start trouble," she said softly. "Tyler's happy. That's what matters." I wanted to shake her, to make her see the danger, but her words felt like an impenetrable wall. She'd always avoided conflict, leaving me to fight alone. Back at my apartment, I called Marcus, my voice tight with frustration. "Patricia confirmed it," I told him. "Amber was with a fraudulent firm in Seattle. Anything new on her?" Marcus sighed. "I dug deeper after we talked," he said. "Her name's on a mortgage document for your parents' house, signed last month. It's a second lien, Rachel, tied to some shell company. If she's pulling what I think, they could lose everything." My stomach dropped. The house I'd poured my savings into, the one I'd fought to keep standing, was now a pawn in Amber's game. I asked Marcus to send me the documents, my hands trembling as I hung up. I spent the next several hours combing through public records online. The mortgage Marcus mentioned was real, a $28,000 loan against the house with Amber's signature scrawled next to Dad's. I found another record, a transfer of funds from my parents' savings account to an account linked to her agency. It wasn't just fraud. It was personal. She'd exploited my family's trust to line her pockets. Every call I'd made to Dad, every warning Mom ignored, felt like a betrayal all over again. They'd chosen Tyler and Amber over me, and now they were entangled in her web. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. The weight of it all, years of carrying the family only to be pushed out, hit me hard. But I wasn't finished. Amber thought she could manipulate everyone, but I'd seen through her from the beginning. I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything we'd built. I saved every document, every email, every scrap of evidence. This wasn't just about protecting the house anymore. It was about exposing her for who she really was. I'd make sure she couldn't hide, no matter how fast she tried to run. One evening, as I was working late at my apartment, my phone buzzed with a call from Mom. Her voice was shaky, almost panicked. "Rachel, there are people here. They're asking for Amber." I grabbed my keys and drove to my parents' house, my heart pounding. When I arrived, 2 federal investigators stood in the driveway, badges visible under the porch light. Dad was at the door, his face pale, while Tyler paced behind him, clutching his phone. "This is regarding several real estate transactions," one investigator said, holding up a stack of documents. "We need to speak with Amber Chen. She's connected to fraudulent transactions, forged documents, and misappropriated funds." I stayed silent, watching as Tyler's eyes widened. "She's lying. Dad, tell me she's lying," Tyler shouted, turning to Mom, who stood frozen in the hallway. The investigators explained that Amber had used Tyler's name on multiple shady deals, including a loan secured against the house. Mom clutched her cardigan, shaking her head, but said nothing. Dad stepped forward, his voice trembling. "She's not here right now," he said. The investigators handed him a card, warning they'd return. As they left, I saw Amber's Tesla pull up across the street. She hadn't noticed me yet. I crossed the road, my phone already recording in my pocket. "Amber?" I called, my voice steady despite the rage inside. She froze, her eyes darting to the house. "What's this about, Rachel?" she asked, her tone defensive. I didn't back down. "I know about the mortgage, the savings account, everything," I said. "You've been draining my family. Tell me the truth." Her face twisted, but she didn't flee. "Fine," she snapped. "I took the money. The house was collateral for a deal. Your dad signed off on it. Tyler was too clueless to notice." I pressed record harder, capturing every word. "You used them," I said. She smirked, unapologetic. "They trusted me, that's on them." Before I could respond, she jumped into her car and sped off, tires screeching. I stood there, the weight of her confession sinking in. She was gone, leaving my family to clean up her catastrophic mess. Back at the house, Tyler was unraveling. "How could she do this?" he muttered, running his hands through his hair. He turned to me, his voice desperate. "Rachel, you knew something was wrong. Why didn't you stop her?" I stared at him, incredulous. "I tried," I said. "You called me jealous. You all shut me out." Mom looked away, her silence louder than ever. Dad sank into a chair, his hands covering his face. The investigators' papers were still on the table, detailing loans and transfers I'd warned them about. My phone rang again later that night. It was Dad, his voice broken. "Rachel, we're in serious trouble," he said. "The bank's calling in the loan. We might lose the house. Can you come back? We need you." I closed my eyes, the years of being dismissed flashing through my mind, the bills I'd paid, the repairs I'd made, the dinner where they'd pushed me out. "No, Dad," I said, my voice firm. "I gave everything for that house, and you chose Tyler and Amber over me. You're on your own now." He pleaded, his words stumbling, but I hung up. For the first time, I felt free, like I'd finally released a weight I'd carried too long. The next morning, I listened to the recording again. Amber's voice, cold and clear, admitting to the scam. I saved it, knowing it could serve as evidence if the investigators needed it. Tyler and my parents were left to face the consequences. Debts piling up, the house at risk, their trust in Amber shattered. I'd done my part, warned them, fought for them. But they'd made their choice. I wasn't going back to fix their mistakes. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house to witness the aftermath. The front yard was eerily quiet, the porch light still on from the night before. Inside, papers were scattered across the dining table, bank notices, loan agreements, and a foreclosure warning. I sat down with Dad, who handed me a folder from the bank. The numbers were devastating. A second mortgage on the house for $28,000 signed by him and Amber with no payments made. Their savings account, once holding nearly $19,000 for retirement, was completely drained, transferred to an account linked to Amber's firm. I traced the transactions, my architect's analytical mind piecing together the wreckage. The house I'd kept afloat for years was now a financial black hole, teetering on the edge of repossession. Tyler slumped on the couch, his eyes bloodshot. "Rachel, you have to help us," he said, his voice cracking. "The bank's coming for everything. We're broke." I looked at him, the brother who'd mocked me at that dinner, who'd called me jealous when I warned him about Amber. "Help you?" I said, my tone icy. "You told me I wasn't crucial, Tyler. You and Dad pushed me out, told me to take the basement or leave. I left. Now you want my money to fix this?" He flinched, but pressed on. "We're family," he said. "You can't just abandon us." I shook my head. "You made your choice. I'm done bailing you out." Dad stood by the window, his shoulders hunched. "I messed up, Rachel," he said, his voice low. "I trusted her. I thought she and Tyler had everything figured out. I was wrong." His admission hit me, but it wasn't enough. For years, I'd poured my savings into their home, worked overtime to cover their bills, only to be sidelined for Tyler's empty promises and Amber's schemes. "You didn't just trust her, Dad," I said. "You chose her over me. You chose Tyler's fantasies over my reality. I can't fix that." He looked at me, his eyes pleading, but I held firm. I'd sacrificed too much already. Mom came in from the kitchen, her face streaked with tears. "Rachel, please," she said, her voice trembling. "We're going to lose everything. The house, our savings, it's all gone." She reached for my hand, but I pulled back. Her silence during that dinner, her refusal to hear my warnings, stung as much as Dad's dismissal. "You didn't listen, Mom," I said. "I tried to tell you about Amber, but you told me to let it go. Now you're asking me to save you." She sobbed, covering her face, but her tears couldn't undo the years of being overlooked. I felt a pang of guilt, but it wasn't enough to change my mind. I wasn't their safety net anymore. I walked through the house, seeing traces of my contributions. The new windows I'd paid for, the dishwasher I'd replaced, the walls I'd painted. It was all at risk now, entangled in Amber's fraud. The bank notices warned of foreclosure within weeks if the loan wasn't addressed. Tyler had no job, no plan, just excuses. Dad's pension wouldn't cover the debt, and Mom's part-time work at a local boutique was barely enough for groceries. They were staring down bankruptcy. And for the first time, I realized I couldn't fix it. Not because I didn't have the means, but because I didn't owe them that sacrifice. I left the house, the weight of their desperation lingering. Back at my apartment, I stared at the recording of Amber's confession, the one piece of leverage I still had. I'd sent it to the investigators, hoping it would help their case, but it wouldn't bring back the money or the house. My family was fractured, not just by Amber's betrayal, but by years of taking me for granted. I'd built a new life in Portland, with my own space, my own choices. I wasn't going back to being the one who carried them all. 6 months later, I sat in my new apartment with Jessica, afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows as we shared a bottle of Oregon Pinot Noir. My desk was covered with blueprints from a new project at work, a sustainable housing development that had earned me a promotion to senior architect. The raise that came with it was enough to furnish my place with a new dining table and the bookshelves I'd always wanted. Jessica, now my closest friend, raised her glass. "To you, Rachel," she said, her smile genuine. "You're absolutely crushing it." I laughed, feeling a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. My life was my own now. Pilates classes twice a week, dinners with Jessica, weekend hikes in the gorge, and a career that was finally mine to shape. I was happy, not because everything was perfect, but because I'd chosen myself. I'd heard through a mutual acquaintance that my family had lost the house. The bank foreclosed after they missed consecutive payments, and they'd moved to a cramped two-bedroom apartment in the suburbs of Portland. Tyler was working part-time at a hardware store, barely scraping by after Amber's betrayal. His confidence was shattered, replaced by desperate late-night texts to friends begging for loans. Dad and Mom were picking up odd jobs, Dad driving for a rideshare service, Mom doing administrative work for a small business. The debts Amber left behind loomed large, with no savings to cushion the blow. They were surviving, but just barely, their lives upended by the choices they'd made. I hadn't spoken to them since that last visit. Tyler sent several texts asking for money or a place to stay, but I didn't reply. Dad left voicemails, his tone softer than before, but I couldn't bring myself to call back. Mom sent a letter once, 2 pages of apologies and regrets, but it sat unopened on my counter. I'd spent years carrying their burdens only to be pushed aside when I needed them most. Cutting them off wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I'd learned to value my self-respect over their expectations, to set boundaries that protected my peace. Looking back, I saw the lesson clearly. Family isn't just blood, it's the people who see you, who value you, who stand by you. Jessica had become that for me, a friend who showed up without asking for anything in return. My family had chosen Amber's lies over my warnings, and I'd paid the price for their blindness. But in walking away, I'd discovered something stronger: my own worth. Setting boundaries wasn't about shutting people out, it was about protecting what mattered most: my heart, my time, my life. I want to thank you for following my story, for staying with me through this journey of betrayal and redemption. It's not easy to draw lines with the people you love, but sometimes it's the only way to save yourself. Have you ever had to set boundaries with your family? What did you learn from it? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your stories. Let's talk about what it means to stand up for ourselves, even when it hurts.